Good morning. Happy Saturday to all of you out there in YouTube world. Welcome to another episode of CoachesCorner.health. I am one of your co-hosts, Leslie Gadat, mindset and emotional awareness coach for women who are successful female entrepreneurs, great skill sets in their CEO role, but they need to incorporate more self-care into their life and business to support them overall emotionally, physically, even spiritually. So that's what I do, and I'm going to hand it over to my co-host, Andy.
Hello, everybody. I'm Andy Lidstone. I'm the unconditional coach. I generally help people have better boundaries. Um, I love your introduction every time, Leslie. I don't think I'll ever get over saying that. um, we got a good one for you today. It's kind of a continuation of what we've been doing so far. First of all, it is a continuation of the series. Is this a problem or is this a symptom? And it is kind of building on what we've done the last couple of weeks. This one we're calling They Don't Get Me.
Yeah.
So give me your thoughts on that, Leslie. What's your initial thoughts on this new subject?
Yeah. So, like you were saying, we're continuing the conversation. I really truly believe that this really just kind of blends well together with the last two episodes. They're ignoring me and you're needy. And the
Yeah.
reason why I feel like this is a great topic, they don't get me, is because when we get put into that box where someone is describing us as being needy, or we feel like maybe we're being too needy, or we feel like our friends or people in our lives are ignoring us, it could just be that maybe we just feel really misunderstood and they don't really get us. So that's kind of like what I am getting from what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, exactly. It just comes from they don't get us, and sometimes we feel misunderstood, sometimes we don't feel like we fit in, you know, but really what's going on? Like, really, what's underneath that? Is that actually what's happening? Is that we don't fit in? Or, is it really what's happening that they don't understand us? Or is there something deeper? Like, am I actually being weird? Maybe I am being weird and that's why I don't fit in. Or maybe there's something about the person or people I'm trying to fit in with that makes them hard to fit into. I know a lot of these cliques in high school can be really difficult to fit into, and sometimes those cliques develop on or continue on into later on into life, into adulthood. I know some of the churches that I've been a part of have been really difficult to fit in with. But again, is that because I was doing something different, or because they were making it hard to fit in? That's the question we're trying to address here, right? What's actually going on? And sometimes it really is just, I'm being weird, or they're being especially closed-minded or something like that. But sometimes, and usually most often, there's something else going on.
Yeah.
Lots of things could be going on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think when you were talking about just even organizations, like you were talking about church as an example, like even to fit in at work,
Yeah.
we typically, when you meet someone, as an example, for the first time, what are you giving them? You're giving them surface level things about yourself. Maybe that's the need for them to like you instantaneously, so that you can then start building on the relationship, whether it's to turn into a friendship, whether it's to turn into a romantic relationship, whether it's to like impress your peers. But you start at that surface level, and then it's as you go through and build on your relationship, how are you building it out to going deeper into your personality, the things you like to do. And sometimes when you start to get to your revealing, or they're revealing parts about themselves, maybe at that point you feel like, well, they don't get me, or I don't get them, right? It can
Right.
be like the opposite. And so I think for me, one of the biggest things that I had learned about, example, when I moved from the US, from Canada to the US when I first got married, and I started working at a law firm in Fort Lauderdale. And I remember it kind of being a little bit cliquey, just the way that the grouping would talk to each other. It's not the first time I'd ever encountered that in a work environment, but this was one that came up to me, popped up right away. And there was one thing I remember. It was I just started working with them, and Thanksgiving was fast approaching. In fact, the Canadian Thanksgiving had already passed, but now it was the U.S. Thanksgiving, and we were having a potluck. And the first thing out of their mouth was, these ladies, was, "Oh, do you celebrate Thanksgiving in Canada?" Almost as if to believe that it was just an American tradition. And I believe it's a worldwide. You can give thanks for anything. I'm sure there are other cultures in the world who have some form of a Thanksgiving feast, whatever they call it.
Yeah.
And so I found it quite interesting, because then, of course, I got a little defensive. And the first thing I said was, "Well, Canada actually celebrates it before you do. What you call Columbus Day, we call Thanksgiving." So it was really funny. And so I thought, well, how do you like fit into a group of people like that when automatically they've already put presupposed judgments on you based on knowing nothing about you except to kind of, I guess, believe what they decide is truth?
Yeah.
And so that kind of made me feel like, well, are they even going to give me the chance to, explore, this relationship with them in a peer environment, in a work environment, or am I always going to have an uphill battle of, comments like that to deal with? So it was quite interesting.
Yeah. I experienced something like that too when I went to a safety company that specializes in oil field safety. I started working in their IT department, with the IT development team, the engineers that were building new things and creating new stuff, both as programmers, as software programmers, and as hardware designers. And I was just essentially a shop grunt for most of those engineers, right? So I just helped out with around the shop, doing like supporting them in different things, and I also went out in the field to do some safety stuff with the rest of the company. And what I found is that I couldn't fit in with either the classic old school redneck types that were out in the oil field, that were out in the field a lot, and cursing and swearing and being very judgmental of other people, nor could I fit in with the kind of ultra modern high tech guys that were part of the department I was supposed to be working with, because I didn't have the several years of university or college that they had all had to earn their different degrees in different positions. So I wasn't respected in either field, even though I had spent 15 or 20 years by that point dealing with and selling technology. I knew what the technology department was doing. I had the knowledge of almost everything they were doing. Plus, my dad worked in the oil field for 40 or 50 years. So I have the experience of the other side of those guys too. So I could technically relate to both. But because of, different characteristics I had, neither side wanted to accept me as well. So I get the same idea there. Like, what clique did I fit in with? Which side did I fit in with? And the other side of that too is because I wasn't, prejudiced or judgmental or as redneck, I guess, in mentality as some of those guys were. They wouldn't accept me because I wasn't judging other people the same way they were. I was more on the side of, let's share, and people are equal, and we all have our value, and they're like, no, we don't. And because I wanted to, treat everybody equally, I had a difficult time making friends amongst those who don't treat people equally. Right. So it was an interesting dynamic. I only lasted that job for just over a year before I went out back to the regular world, where people do accept each other for different characteristics. Yeah, it was an interesting job. And what I found, it was difficult. What I'm getting at is sometimes we have difficulty fitting in with people, because we might think of ourselves as more evolved than them. Because I wasn't prejudiced and judgmental, I thought of myself as, wanting to help them expand their mind, and I almost treated them as though I was better than them, because I was willing to accept other people, and I was trying to share that with them. And I was in the company of, hundreds of other guys that didn't want that personality. So I was the minority, whereas I was trying to help them see that, there's a better way of thinking. So yeah, I found it difficult to fit in.
It's funny that you brought that up, because I never really got it until I finally did one day. I realized that with experience, there comes like this knowledge, this wisdom. It doesn't, just because you have something on paper doesn't mean that you're more qualified. And the reason why I believe this is because as I started, developing my legal career more in the US, started working for title companies, which dealt with like the title aspect for closings, for residential closings for the people that I worked with, and then working with builders who also had an in-house team like myself. One of the things I found was that, it doesn't come down to always what you know, it's who you are, right? And, I know they say, well, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But I sometimes also believe it's not just what you know, it's who you are. And one of the women that I worked with, in fact, a couple of them, one, I was working with her in the beginning as we worked really well together as a team. She ended up moving to Missouri. And so we had to find someone else. And she was a Florida born and raised girl. So that was quite an interesting change when I saw that she was doing that. But she's still there and she's loving it.
Yes.
But one of the women that came in for an interview came from the food industry. Now, she came from the food industry with the mindset of leadership. She'd been leading a team. So she understood organization. She understood protocol, all of that, those types of things. But she came in with the right attitude. And it was
Right.
who she was that got her the position. Because ultimately, she ended up being one of the best people that I've ever worked with. She became my assistant and one of the best people I've ever worked with in the industry, working together alongside as a team. And I felt like it wasn't necessarily that she knew about what we were doing. She had never been exposed to law in the way that I had working in law firms. But she came in with the right attitude and was willing to learn and to grow. So that was one of the things I felt like really makes a difference when you're either judging someone or not. It's not necessarily that just because someone had on paper all of the skills, all of the qualifications. Sure, that's great. But who are you as a human being bringing those skills and qualifications to the environment? Because I truly believe that you may not have had all of those degrees, all those college years, all those university years, but you've had 15 years of experience working within the industry.
Yeah.
And you had the ability and the willingness to come in and give to that environment. You were hired, obviously, for a reason.
Yeah.
They saw that potential in you. So it's quite interesting that, and I think this goes also a step further is, okay, great. You have a business, you are hiring people from outside who are not necessarily on paper qualified for the positions. And you do have people already on the team who are qualified. They have it on paper that they're qualified and you like their work.
Right.
How are you going to meld those two together? Because I think it's on the owner or the business owner to actually then allow, to bring the two teams, to bring those people together so that you're not going in there thinking, oh, they don't get me, they don't respect me, they don't want me here. They're not willing to work with me, right? So it was just something that when you had said that, it brought back that memory for me. I think it's really important for people to recognize that you might be in a position right now. I'm talking to you, the viewer. You might be working in a field right now, and someone came in that doesn't have the same qualifications as you. But if they've come in with the willingness and the right attitude, and they're a good worker, and they're willing to learn, and especially learn from you, and if you're willing to impart the wisdom and knowledge and the experience that you have and help them, you help that become a great working team environment in your own industry. Because for me, I truly believe that you are only as good as your weakest link. So if you're not willing to support your teammate just because he or she does not have the qualifications that you have, then all you are as good as is that person that's come in, and you're not willing to help them. When you lift them up, it becomes such a better environment, and your work environment then becomes, a team environment, and that team environment can make that company like become even better, bigger and better than they even expected, because you really did embrace teamwork, right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and I agree. I love that story, and I completely agree that when we go into a new company, we don't bring necessarily what that company is expecting us to bring. We bring a whole lot more than that. We bring our entire life's experiences, some of which is professional and some of which isn't, and therefore we have a lot to offer that company. We have a lot to offer, and it's not just about work. It could be friendships and families, and when we get married, we join into a whole new family, and our spouse joins into our family, and there's a lot we can bring. And whether or not we fit in, whether or not they get me, or whether or not you get them, has a lot less to do with the differences or the problems, and a lot more to do with the differences that we see as solutions. To build on my example of that company that I was working for in the oil field, this oil field safety company, that IT department eventually wanted to buy a bunch of computers for the guys out in the field to put all of their systems online for the guys out in the field to use computers, and switch over from the paper contracts and the paper reporting systems that they had been using, because some guys are out in the field for months at a time, right? So that paperwork wasn't getting back to the office for a month or two at a time. They wanted to be done by the computer so that they, at the end of every day, they could have all the reports. And I had spent 10, 15, 20 years in retail selling computers to these guys. And when the IT department went to buy new computers, I went to them and I said, look, I sell computers to these guys. I have relevant experience to what you're looking for. And they completely ignored everything I said, right? They spent a third as much as they should have on new computers. They sent them all out to the field with this new piece of software. And for some reason, a year later, something like 10% of the guys were using them. I'm like, well, yeah, because they don't like these computers you sent out to them. They're kind of useless, right? I told you this a year ago. And that's kind of the point that I'm getting at is we sometimes, when we're trying to fit in, when we're trying to integrate new members into our teams, sometimes we don't include the relevant experience they do have. Mm-hmm. Maybe they have the qualifications we're asking for, maybe they don't, but what we don't usually do, or I won't say usually, what lots of teams don't always do is we don't include the peripheral relevant experience that may not be related to the job description itself, but it could help the company in other ways. Other things that a person can do. And when you're coming into a company, don't restrict yourself to just your job description. If there is other ways you can help that company, offer that. Good companies will want that relevant peripheral experience. And if they don't, and all they want is your job description, well, then do that. But the better companies, the ones that we all enjoy working for, those ones like all of our different relevant experiences, even if it doesn't have anything to do with our job description. And, who knows, you might end up with a different job description. You might end up in a different position. You might end up in something that you weren't directly trained for, but you have experience related to, and you might just, switch laterally or get a promotion or something, right? It's quite possible that good companies will take advantage of your skill set in a way that they didn't know they could.
Yeah, no, I think that is really important to really like absorb that information, like what you just shared, because it is really what I guess now is commonly known as being a culture add. Like, what can you add to the culture of this new company that you stepped into, or you're already working in this environment? I truly believe that, like even like where I am right now, I am my own boss, but I support a team of lawyers and paralegals as in an independent contractor role. And I've been doing that for over 4 years. And it has come to the attention of the managing partner that I'm also a life coach. And so he's recognized that, because he's come to me about it and has enjoyed that I have been so supportive in an encouraging and supportive role to the other team members in the language that I use, in how I interact with the other employees, or the lawyers, the paralegals, all of the support staff. And so that again is, I'm bringing a different part of myself that I do outside of that role, but I'm allowing it to, I'm integrating it a little bit into working with them and how I support them. And coming from that mindset will allow me to maybe approach things differently than I would have if I was just simply another employee of the company. And so I think why we're talking about work as an example is because I think this is one of the places where it can be really, really tricky, or for lack of a better word, to really feel like you fit into this environment, because these are not really people necessarily. Maybe some of them are, but not necessarily are they developing into friendships outside of the workspace. You're typically, you see them 9 to 5, whatever your work schedule is. If maybe you work at home, so you're an online worker, but whatever that looks like for you, it's still not necessarily I guess a relationship that is invested in you personally, like with love and wanting to care about you in that capacity, like your family and your friends outside of work. Some of your friends, people at work could be your friends and could hold those roles for you, but not necessarily is your boss going to. Maybe some of the other higher the managers, managing teams, things like that are going to be in those roles where it's friendship. It's really more just about employee, employer, or it's work peer, whatever that looks like. So it's when you can go into these relationships, looking at it from a perspective of, okay, I'm not sure how I'm fitting in here. So looking at, okay, well, what are my gifts? What are my skill sets? What am I bringing to the table? How can I do that really well? And finding a way to fit in that way is not necessarily that you're trying to become a chameleon, but it's what can you bring into the environment through your skill sets for the job that you were hired to do. And as Andy had said earlier, not necessarily that you're just saying, I'm staying in this box, this is what you gave me to do, but how can you enhance upon that and make that even better? That brings more value to the company, which brings you joy because you're good at something and you can do this. That allows you to then start building those relationships, in a way that it becomes more of, like, okay, they're starting to get me a little bit more. I'm starting to get them a little bit more. I'm starting to feel like I fit into this culture that I've found myself in and that I'm working in. And so that way I'm adding something of value, and always look at it that way. I think a lot of people right now, you've probably heard this, they hate their job. But is it really their job that they hate, or just how they're showing up to the job because of maybe feeling like they're misunderstood, and not looking at, okay, well, looking at what is the issue really? Because is the problem they don't get me, or is it a symptom of something bigger, right? Again, going deeper, like your self-esteem, things like that. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that into it as well.
Yeah, and you're right. We have been using the job example because when the problem when the problem is simply that I don't fit in or they don't get me, that's most common in a work environment. In simply that, there is some personality trait or some characteristic that doesn't fit in with the culture that's already there, or maybe there's a characteristic of the culture that's already there that you didn't anticipate and you weren't ready for, and so this is part of what can cause, that not fitting in, or they don't get me at work. That often can be just the problem all by itself, is that I don't fit in. And like you said a moment ago, sometimes it's much deeper. Sometimes there's some trauma within me that I just assume I'm not going to fit in, and therefore, therefore there are things that I do, characteristics that I have, personality traits that I have that I'm not even conscious of often the times, that make it difficult for people to be friends with me, make it difficult for me to fit in, and that's more commonly seen. We can recognize that more commonly in our families when we're trying to fit into a family. So let's use the example of marrying into a new family. Although it works if I make a new friend and we become close friends, and then I meet their family, and we start hanging out at each other's houses and hanging out with each other's family members. It can happen that way too, but it's much more common in couples, because we do, whether we get married officially or just do the soft marriage of common law is what it's commonly called, of living together, or spending our lives together. We do get into a whole new family, and in those cases we're not necessarily signing up for the family. We didn't apply for a job, we didn't apply to become a part of this family. We just found a person we care about, and that person happens to come with family. So we don't necessarily have a desire or a vested interest in wanting to join the family, but we do have a vested interest in joining this person. And depending on how close they are to their family, we might actually, by default, develop an interest in joining in developing relationships with their family. So in those cases, that's where it's more likely to come out that there's something deeper. If I'm not fitting in with, say, my spouse's siblings, if I'm not fitting in with my spouse's parents, if I'm not fitting in with my spouse's closer family unit, there often is there is often something deeper. There is often traumas on one side or the other, often both sides. There often is characteristics that are incompatible. There are characteristics that we didn't even know we carried, or maybe that family member or those family members didn't know they carried. So often trying to fit in with our partner's family can be difficult. There's a reason that the in-laws has a classic tone when we say that. Trying to get along with the in-laws can be difficult. Again, because we didn't sign up to be in a relationship with their family. We signed up to be in a relationship with that person, and often not knowing who the family is first. So oftentimes we can fit in with somebody else's family, or feel like we don't fit in. Often we can feel like they don't get me. Often we can feel like we don't really know what's going on. Is this something wrong with me? Is this because they're all weird and messed up? Like, how would I know? Like, this is the difficulty we have when we're marrying into a new family. And as I said, there's various other circumstances where this comes up too. And actually, as you mentioned already, trauma and characteristic and personality characteristics can come up in the work environment. that can interfere there. Although typically what happens in a work environment is it is more just a problem of not fitting in with the culture. In families, you're in much more casual and intimate environments. Going to Christmas dinner and hanging out with people's children, and sometimes having drinks together. You tend to get into more intimate environments, more situations where you're talking about more deeply emotional subjects. Religion and politics, for example. There's a reason they say don't talk to your family about religion and politics. Those things can be, more intimate than some people want to talk about. These things is where it can become more of a symptom. I don't fit in because of this deeper thing going on, either with me or within the family of themselves.
Yeah. So with family, that's so funny that you brought that up, because I truly, there's that whole dynamic. So I'm the one in this team right now who has been married for quite a long time. It will be 27 years in less than 3 months, and yeah, we both have a we both came to the table with, this is my family, this is his family, and there was expectations on both sides
Yeah.
of his family and my family, what they expected the two of us to bring to the table as a married couple. And maybe it wasn't spoken out loud, but it was there.
Yeah.
The expectations were there until they were finally, some of them were finally spoken out loud. I think that's where it can be really tricky because, as example, you have maybe beliefs around specific things, like or certain routines, certain family routines. Every Christmas it's held, Christmas dinners held here, or Thanksgiving, or with birthdays and anniversaries and Easter dinners, and with Mother's Day and Father's Day, and all of those traditions. And there's specific expectations from each side, what they expect you as a couple to bring to the table. Like, how are you going to meet? It's very difficult to do that too, because you cannot meet both sides' expectations at the same time. And so that's where you're going to find your butt heads. And so as a person going into the opposite family, and they have these beliefs or expectations around how things go. One area I know particularly some of my friends have spoken about is the dynamic when children are born and how they should be raised. And usually that's where they can butt heads. Like, this has got to be done this way because this is how we did it. And that's where it's like it can be really hard to figure that out. How do you fit into that environment going into the opposite family? I mean, they become your family, as you were saying, in-laws. In law, they become family. And so, I mean, we could really go off on a tangent on this one. I mean, this could take us down a whole rabbit hole of conversation, but I just want to bring it back to what I believe is something I've been witnessing, which has been incredible. So I want you to know that this can actually work, where two people get married or they spend their lives together and they each bring family to the table, and it can actually work. Mm-hmm. Meaning they can decide together what they want for them, because they become family. When you marry with someone, or you decide to spend your life with somebody, they are your immediate family first, before your blood relatives, before his blood relatives, right? Yeah. And I think people often forget that piece. It's like, oh, he's now become my husband is now become my first most important family member. He's my husband. He's my teammate. He comes first, above his family, above my family. Right. And so one of the things that I've been watching, I have a couple friends who have been married for about, I think it's been 6 or 7 years now. They just had their second baby 4 days ago. Gorgeous little man. So they now have 2 boys. One's 2, just over 2, and now this newborn. And what's really amazing, what I've been watching, they've been documenting their life on Instagram, and it's such a beautiful thing to watch, because it gave me hope to realize that there are people out there that are doing this. They are both sides of the family, both equation, husband and wife, both families come together. They spend holidays together. They go on vacations together. They spend Christmas. They have like the Christmases and the Thanksgivings and the birthday celebrations and the anniversaries, the Mother's Days and Father's Days celebrations. They celebrate together, and they celebrate each other. And it's such a beautiful thing that I've been watching. Like, I just cannot even like it's hard to explain what I'm feeling, but it's such a beautiful thing to watch. Yeah. So that to me is proof that they found a way, the two of them, to figure out how can we make this entire family unit work. Is how can we understand them so that they feel understood? How can I be myself so that they get me? And it becomes less of a you or a them problem, and it becomes more of an us. How do we make us work, right? And so that was something I wanted to bring, because as I said, it's just been such a beautiful journey to watch for the past couple of years that I've been watching now. And prior to that, as she's always been on social media, her and her husband, but up, just from the first pregnancy and going all the way through, and just the sharing and the caring, and just watching how the beautiful memories that they share together. They really make a point of having even game night. Like, I just was like blown away watching game night. They're doing charades, or they're doing Pictionary, or things like that. Or I know there's other games that you can play, but they're just like having so much fun, and they go all out. And so for me, it's like bringing it back in. It's not that you have to do all of that, but it's how do you create that culture for yourself, for your family, because it becomes us. Even though it's the two of you, it's still us. You have the extension of us, and the other parts, don't forget, they also have their family history, their beliefs, their experiences, their traumas. So it's not, one of the ways I guess I would say is, instead of going into it with a wounded self, where you're feeling like, well, they don't get me. I always feel like we're butting heads. That's why I don't get along with my mother and or father-in-law. Instead, go into it looking at, okay, how can I actually understand them more, so that I can, get it and understand where they're coming from, and then be able to share who I am in a way that helps them understand me a little bit better, and heals this or brings this relationship closer. That's how I would do it. But I mean, it takes work. It's not going to just be easy. Like, you just do what I just said and it's going to work the first time. It's just learning to be willing and open to actually say, you know what, I'm not going to come at it like, oh, it's us or them. I'm not going to like put ultimatums on my husband. We're not going here because your family is demanding. Instead, work together to come up with your own traditions and beliefs, or not so much expectations, but your agreements, and then you can work with the us part of it and figure that out together.
I love that. There's so many things I want to play off of what you just said. When we enter somebody else's family, so we get into a relationship with somebody, we join their family, the most successful way to deal with they don't get me is by trying to get them, by trying to meet them where they're at. Like you said, they're all traumatized. They're all, they've got their own family history. They've got their own traditions. If you show up and say, we're doing stuff this way, you're going to find resistance, Yet, if you show up and say, well, this is how we did stuff, and, I understand this is how you do stuff, can we, find some sort of a compromise? And that compromise might be we do Christmas here that one year and there another year, or we might that compromise what might be that we alter some of our traditions in this way or that way. Compromise is how we can, get past this. They don't get me, or we don't fit in. Oftentimes that is it is just a surface problem in family, but usually there's something deeper going on. So if you can figure out what that deeper thing is, either in yourself or in the other people, in the people you're trying to get along with, oftentimes we can bridge that without having to, make everybody cure their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We can bridge those conversations. We can compromise some of those things. We can, meet people where they're at. And another thing I wanted to mention is oftentimes, like you mentioned earlier, families have their own traditions already. And this is no more prevalent than in two different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Ask somebody from a Greek family to marry somebody from a Muslim family and see what happens. Right? There's a reason that people prefer to marry within their own culture, because then any traditions that are based on that culture are still shared. There are fewer things that need to be compromised. But you take a Jewish and a Catholic person and you marry them, and you're going to have some serious traditions to try and compromise, right? These are things that we don't think about until we're in a relationship with somebody from a different culture. And these are things that we can, again, meet them where they're at. It's a matter of learning, what are you willing to compromise and what are you not willing to compromise? And the more you're not willing to compromise, the more you're risking losing relationships. Like you might lose your partner might lose parts of his family, and you might lose parts of your family because of what you are or are not willing to compromise, right? And the last part is what, with my ex-wife and I, when we were together for nearly 20 years, instead of her not getting along with my family and me not getting along with her family, it was each of us not getting along with our own families. I got along with her family better than she did. So when we didn't go visit with her family, when we avoided her family, it was because she didn't want to go visit with them. When we avoided my family, it's because I didn't want to go visit with them. So what I can suggest as another possible solution is try and meet your partner where they're at within their family. Your partner is the person you chose. Your partner is the person that you've chosen to spend your life with. They're the one you've chosen to try and share values with. And if your partner has certain values in their family, then it's those values you want to focus on. Not the values of the mother-in-law or the brother or the great aunt or whatever. It's the values of your partner that you want to focus on. If there are certain things within your partner that you have problems with, certain traditions and values that your partner shares, then that's the first place you want to compromise. That's the first place you want to deal with and come to some understandings around. Once you've done that, then your partner can help you navigate the relationships with the rest of your family, with the rest of their family, his or her family. Oftentimes when we become, like when we get married with somebody and we become a part of somebody else's family, we try and join their family and they don't necessarily like it. I've seen many couples separate and the thing that they miss the most is each other's family. They don't miss each other. Even if they have kids together, they don't want to co-parent. They'll often send the kids off to an aunt or an uncle of the other side because they get along with that aunt or an uncle from the other side better than they do with their ex. So be careful of how you're integrating with the other person's family. Go through your partner and let them make some decisions about how you want to integrate. This is one of the things that my ex-wife and I did. I led the decisions about how we interacted with my family. She led the decisions about how we interacted with her family, even though I got along with her family and she got along with my family. What that allowed is that any decision I made, she could support me with. Any decision she made, I could support her with, because I got along with most of them. So that's, there's a few things there. The cultural thing is significant. If you don't want to compromise very much, then it might be easier to marry somebody within your culture that has similar cultural desires and cravings that you have, similar cultural values that you have. If you're one of these outliers that thinks love should come first, then marry whoever you want and realize you might be compromising more than you anticipated. I'm one of those. I'd rather just love first and compromise whatever I got to make it work. However, not everybody wants to do that. Sometimes the compromise can cause the breakdown of the relationship. So be careful what you're getting into. Understand your values, what you desire, what you're willing to do, and keep that in mind when you're trying to fit in, so that you don't become the problem. So that you're not the reason that you don't get along with the family. So that you aren't the thing that's underneath the not fitting in. You could become the problem for which the symptom is you don't fit in. If the symptom is you don't fit in, then you might be the reason you're not fitting in. Mm-hmm. You could also be, let's say you've been married for 27 years and one of your siblings gets married. You could also be the problem, the reason their new spouse doesn't feel welcomed into your family. Be careful mm-hmm. of that also. Mm-hmm. Right? Just some things, just some food for thought to think about. These are different ways that we can be the problem that either ourselves or other people don't fit into our families.
Yeah. One of the things you touched on was, again, the cultural thing, because I truly believe that we are just, I don't know if it's blinders or if it's just, again, I love the fact that you say love comes first, and no matter who the person is. But again, it's really recognizing that sometimes love is not enough. Right. And I can use, because in this particular sense, I was involved with someone who was Greek for 7 years before I met my husband. That was a huge culture, because not only was his parents expecting him to marry within the Greek family, to marry a Greek woman, but he is also dating someone who, well, if you look, I look different, right? I look much different than he is. So, it was something that we had we talked about in the very beginning, but I don't think we really fully grasped how significant our relationship, the differences would play in the decision at the end, because it really did come down to, I am not Greek, but more importantly, not only am I not Greek, I am not white. Right. Okay. And it's not that his parents did not like people of color. They just did not want that in their family. Right. But in essence, that was a little bit of prejudice, but, and that was very hurtful. So that was a lesson to learn again. So when you are, again, thinking about love and, wanting to get into a relationship based on how you feel about a certain person, and maybe pursuing a longer term relationship with that person, I'm not the only example I can give you. I mean, I do know other people who've had, they have married other cultures, Italian and Black, and family members didn't make it to the wedding or refused to come even to the birth of their children. Okay. And so when that happens, that can be very scarring. And how do you explain to your children why their extended family isn't a part of their life, right? So still, we're still talking about this fitting in, but this is really important, because as you go out into the world, and if you are deciding on being with somebody and you really love them, make sure you have that conversation around this, because it can make it a lot easier for the two of you to actually fit your relationship into your bigger family dynamic when you've had those conversations and you are in agreement with each other, and it is about you and how you see your lives unfolding together, and you're willing to put in the work as you have to face these challenges around culture, beliefs and traditions, and how you move through those. I think it's really important that you take those into account, because it will save you a whole lot of heartache if down the road, the relationship that you built that was strong in the beginning, that you got together and it was strong in the beginning, but was torn apart because the bigger issue was the family, the cultural beliefs were just too great, because you didn't allow yourselves to actually come to an agreement with that, right?
Yeah.
And allowing that to, when you've already decided together that those cultural beliefs are great, they're beautiful, but this is what you decided for each other and for your family, it helps you to stay strong as you go through some of those challenges. But again, like Andy said, you can choose to either not put yourself in that arena and say, you know what, that's too hard, and I'm going to start looking for people, even if they're not necessarily like Italian or Greek, but they're close enough in that area that my parents, grandparents, extended family will accept, then great. That's what you do. But if somebody comes across you, whether they're like maybe Asian or they're Black or whatever other culture that they're from, they're Spanish and they come from a different culture, and you really dig this person and this is who you want to be with, and you're willing to do it together so that you both fit into the dynamic as a couple that's strong, then yes, you can do that. But it really takes time to really think about it, because as I said, I'm a living example of it, and I know how difficult it was for me. I had to unlock and I had to really unpack a lot of like trauma from that for myself when we did finally break up, because I had a whole lot of things I was telling myself, and I had to really really go through that. And so that's why this is just coming from a little bit of a warning from experience. And so I just wanted to throw that in.
I have a similar experience, not based on color or culture per se, but based purely on religion. My wife, my ex-wife, was born and raised Catholic, and she was the most loyal Catholic, or one of the most loyal Catholics in her family. She went to church much more than most of her family did. Even as a child, she would go to church when her parents didn't. Like, she would skip school and go to church. She would go to church when her parents didn't want to go. She'd catch a ride with somebody else to go to church on Sundays. And she was really, really devout Catholic. My parents, my mom told me when I was a child that I could be anything when I grew up except Catholic. So guess who I married? Right? Not that I did so on purpose. That just happened to be who I fell in love with. And because of that, you mentioned they might not come to your wedding. They might not show up at your children's birth. None of my family, not a soul from my family, showed up to my wedding. My family table was empty. I had to sit my bridal party at it, my best men at it, so that it wasn't, so I didn't have this empty table at the front of the room. And you might have heard from my tone, it did cause a little bit of resentment. This is part of why I chose to not hang out with my family after I was married. It wasn't about what my wife thought, because she wasn't offended by it nearly to the level that I was. So it did cause some rift in the family. I didn't fit in anymore to my family, and to this day, most of them don't see me as part of the family. I mean, technically I'm blood, but they don't include me in almost anything. So when we're fitting in, we can make things worse with our judgments of who they are, what they're supposed to be doing. We can make things worse by closing their options and not being willing to compromise. And this is, I think, what we're both talking about with our experiences. For a little bit, when you were talking about your experience there, I kind of zoned out because your memories triggered memories of mine, and I'm like, and I started reliving some of that. Right? Maybe there's more healing for me yet to do, because that's ever the case. Yes, there's always more healing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a subject that's close to us. If they don't get you, are you the problem, or are they the problem? Or does one or both of you have deeper problems that these are just a symptom of?
Mm-hmm.
Right? These are the questions, and there are many ways to answer that question. I think that's what we're coming down to as we wrap up this episode, is that there are many problems, many solutions, whether you're at work, whether you're joining a new family, whether you're talking about friendships, whatever the relationships are, there are many versions of it, and it really takes some willingness to openly admit to our own stuff. It really takes some willingness to look at what's actually going on. It takes some willingness to just do a closer examination if you want to solve this idea of they don't get me. Right? Yeah,
Wow.
it really takes a little bit to get in there.
Yeah. And so again, this was beautiful. I love that share, Andy. Thank you for, opening up about that. Because I know for me, I've worked through that trauma myself. Maybe
Mhm.
I opened up something for you to maybe take a closer look at. But this is really powerful because we recognize that just because we go through specific trainings or we unpack other issues does not mean that something else might not pop up
Right.
along our lifetime that we may have to revisit. And again, it could even be the same type of thing that pops up that you have to revisit again, and that's okay. Self-development is not a one and done thing. You don't just go through a program and you're good. It's a choice. It's a lifestyle choice you lean into so that you can heal yourself, but you can start living your life like you wake up every day joyful for another day. Like I get to live a brand new day that hasn't even yet been lived, and I get to decide how I'm going to show up in the things that I do. And maybe some of those things are already planned out, but it's how you approach it and you get into it. So I appreciate that you shared that story today.
Yeah,
I think, yeah, we have a lot in common, and we're
we
still
do.
learning. We're still, even though we've known each other for a couple of years, we are still learning about each other. And I
Yeah,
think that's great because as this is developing our friendship,
yeah,
not only as colleagues in the industry, but also as friends.
yeah,
And so I think this is great. Again, we've learned how to fit in together by learning about each other and what we bring to the table and accepting, not necessarily accepting, but I would say embracing each
yeah,
other's differences and embracing the things that we have in common and getting to learn more and get curious around the things that maybe we don't and learning more and more about each other. So I
yeah.
love that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. This is awesome. It's a great relationship, and we hope that you guys also enjoy our relationship, enjoy watching us grow closer as friends, enjoy watching us discuss some of these topics that obviously have touched each of us. Um, we've been doing this for quite a while now, and I don't think there's ever been a topic that's come up that we haven't had personal experiences involved in. Um,
Mhm.
so if this does touch you, if this is something you're interested in, of course, do the typical YouTube, like and like the video. Make sure that YouTube knows that you like it, so that it shows it to more people. Um, Subscribe so that you get, so that you get more of our content. Um, you know, Comment. Let us know what it is that you think of our content, what it is you think of what we're talking about, and if there's any future content, any future topics you'd like us to cover, let us know that too. Share it around. Let other people know if there's something significant that you thought was good or that you think could be helpful to them. Let other people know as well. Just share this around. Like, subscribe, share, comment. All those things that YouTube likes, we also like them. That helps us to become better at what we're doing. It helps us to serve you better. So we appreciate it. We appreciate you for joining us, for sharing in this content. And we appreciate the things that you do to help support us too.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great conversation. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, all of you. And we will be back again next Saturday at our regular time, 10 a.m. Eastern. For now, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your weekend, a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye
We'll
for
see you
now.
next time, everybody. Goodbye.